Holy Happy Hour, Batman. I'm Father Ben. I'm an Episcopal priest, a longtime gamer, ttrpg enthusiast, streamer, podcast host, and co-founder of the All Ports Open Network. On this show, Holy Happy Hour Batman, I'm joined by heroes of the gaming and geek world to talk about life, faith, spirituality, and honestly, whatever else comes up. This show is a production of allportsopen.com, a collaboration of creative people who think deeply about play and the world around them. We make podcasts, videos, and games for people to enjoy and engage with. APON was founded as a place where people of all worldviews, beliefs, and identities could enjoy and contemplate what it means to play together. So go, if you want to check out our other great shows, you can go to allportsopen.com. On this episode of Holy Happy Hour Batman, we have another great episode. I am really excited about today's episode because we have another amazing guest. Tracy Barnett is joining us today to talk about Iron Edda Reforged, coming to Kickstarter on September 28th, a week from tomorrow. Very exciting. Tracy is the designer of Iron Edda, editor on the One Shot podcast and project manager with the One Shot Network, and designer of very many other games. So we'll be talking about all that in just a few minutes. But before we bring them on the show, I would like to share a couple of quick things. So we have an amazing lineup of episodes over the next few weeks. I'm really excited about the lineup coming up, like just super excited about it. Next Monday, we're going to be joined by Joshua A.C. Newman, designer of games like Bloody Handed Name of Bronze, other great games. I've been wanting to have Joshua on the show since the show started, on my original list of guests I wanted to get on the show. So I'm really looking forward to next week. You're not going to want to miss that one. So definitely mark your calendar for next week. And then I'll be on vacation for 1 week after that, but I'll be back on October 11th. And when I come back on October 11th, I will be joined by none other than the legendary award-winning game master and game designer, Jeff Stormer. My friend Jeff Stormer is coming back on the show, our first repeat guest here at Holy Happy Hour Batman. So very much looking for anytime I have an opportunity to do anything with Jeff, it's a blast. So I know that one's going to be really good too. We've got a whole list of awesome guests through the beginning of November. If you go to my Twitter account, you can see the full lineup there. Now, it is happy hour. And so the first thing we always do on the show is we have a cocktail or non-alcoholic beverage inspired by our guest and perhaps the game that they've designed oftentimes. So this week I have a drink inspired by the Iron Edda. I don't know if franchise is the right word, but by Iron Edda. And it is, you can see it here on the screen. It is, I have called it, Be the Ragnarok You Want to See in the World. Since one of the taglines of this game is Ragnarok is something like Ragnarok is here and it's you. I'm probably butchering the branding, but I'll let Tracy correct me in a minute. But you can see the drink right here on the screen. This is really good. I really wanted to do something with mead in it for this. That was really what I wanted to do. And I happen to have a single hive honey whiskey from New Liberty Distillery in their Kinsey line, a local Philly distillery that I basically base all the cocktails on the show off of. Really good friends right here in Philadelphia. And so you can see it's 2 ounces of the single hive honey whiskey, 2 ounces of mead, some orange bitters to kind of bring out some of those orange flavors in the honey and in the whiskey. And so basically just sort of turned it into like a martini style drink. Basically just a trick I recently learned for these is not to shake them. I recently learned to like fill a really big glass of sorts, like something maybe like I don't know if you can be able to see this, something like this, like you can fill almost anything with ice and then make it in that, stir it, and then strain it into the martini glass. You get less ice melt if you do it that way. It's a trick I just recently learned at a cocktail event the other week. So that's sort of there in the description. I am going to post the recipe card for this. Actually, I already did because I set it all up beforehand and we're past the time that it automatically went live. So if you go to my Twitter account, literally right now, you can see the recipe card for this drink and it's live on there. So you can check that out. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and bring Tracy on the show. I'm gonna switch over to Tracy. So let's, by the magic of the internet. Nope, that's not it. But it'll be here momentarily. Everybody, sorry about that, folks. I'm fixing it. All right, try now. How about now?
How about now? Can you hear me?
Hey, holy happy hour. Start it all over
Holy
again.
happy hour,
There you
Batman.
go.
Thank you for having me. I just told him in the chat, don't worry, I can 100% nail the intro again.
There you go. Awesome. Sorry about the technical difficulties, folks. I was actually thinking a minute ago that, and I just realized, man, it's one of those nights for technical difficulties. It's because I had this mental thought a few minutes ago, which was, that, and I didn't say it out loud because I was like, I don't want to jinx myself, that there's always something, always something goes wrong. And then I was like, well, don't say it out loud and maybe you'll avoid it this time. No.
No, it's sneaky like that.
Yeah. Well, so I am actually trying to, one other thing that I just realized is I'm just fixing it right now. I realized that we're not live on YouTube. So as we're chatting here, I'm fixing it at the same time, but
sure.
So you're a week away from the Kickstarter. That's gotta be really exciting.
Yeah, it is super exciting. Doing Kickstarters is kind of becoming my business model for how to be an independent creator of things and to provide, enough money for me to hold up my portion of sort of the bargain that I have as being a partner in my marriage. Right. So, I'm actually planning on trying to do a Kickstarter every quarter.
Okay.
For the foreseeable future. And there are a lot of sort of constraints that puts on a project. That means it's going to be a particular kind of project with a particular kind of scope. But that's fine. I like doing zine style games. They're things that I can generally produce mostly on my own. Like You Were the Dungeon that I did back in June.
Right.
That was 100%. I just did that top to bottom.
Okay.
The whole nine. This project is different. It has an entire team and it's funding an actual play podcast and a video actual play series, both that are going to happen through the One Shot Network. So it's a bit of a different beast. But there are also no stretch goals aside from pay everybody more money. Whereas with You Were the Dungeon, I had a commission for a deck of tarot cards and I'm producing physical decks for that and so on and so forth. So every project's a little bit different. And I'm stoked to have this one kick off.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I'm really intrigued by let's maybe put a pin in it for a second because I'm intrigued by the no stretch goals other than paying people more, which I think is really interesting. But I want to show people trying to get us a little, okay. I want to show people the trailer because we have, hey, speaking of firsts on the show, this is the first time we ever showed a trailer on the show. I'm really excited about this, actually.
Yeah, hit it.
I saw it earlier, and I was like, Tracy, can we get the trailer on the show? So let's do that real quick. We're going to advance to the trailer, and then we'll be right back.
Jotunheim, the heart of the network of the gods. Miles of bone, sinew, and synapse, torn from the bodies of dead giants, used to feed the machine. It's time to tear it all down. The gods, their words, their works. Ragnarok is coming, and it's you. It's us. A neon Fimbulwinter where we rise up and take the gods down. And it starts here, in Jotunheim. So, you in? Iron Edo Reforged, Season 1, Jotunheim.
All right. That's an awesome trailer. And hey, the really great voice acting on that from Aaron. Former guest on the show.
We know some similar folks, it turns out. I mean, Jeff Stormer is one of the playtesters and is in the podcast that is being produced by all of this Kickstarter. So
yes, that's so exciting. I didn't know he was like a producer, but I knew he was going to be on the podcast.
Yeah, so the podcast portion is it's multi-purpose, right? It's an actual play, so people can see how the game itself works, but it's also the audio of us playtesting the system. I got Jeff, obviously, and then Alex Flanagan and B. Zelda to come and sort of join me in doing that before I really had an idea of what the final end result was going to be.
Oh, that's cool.
So the original plan for Iron Edda Reforged was to do a full book, right? A full-on thick, just a single volume. And then I was planning, I was looking at like time ticking down to like sort of the window of where I wanted to launch a Kickstarter. And I was going to do a sequel to You Are the Dungeon. And as I was writing it, I wasn't feeling the juice. I wasn't like excited about it. And to do a Kickstarter that is largely an independent venture, I need to really be excited about what I'm doing. And so I got this wild idea and I floated it past Jeff and B and Alex, because they are obviously the people who are closer to this project than anyone but me. And asked if it would be unreasonable. Did they think it was a strange idea to just do a zine style release of just the realm that they were playing in, which is Jotunheim? And they were like, no, that seems completely reasonable and doable. And I was like, great, I know how to do that. And I just off to the races.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So the Kickstarter is funding the release of the zine. It's going to be something. The max is 64 pages, mainly because that's what I quoted out from the printer, and that is 32 8.5 by 11 pieces folded, with a cover. Because I don't want to go much beyond that for a zine, because then then suddenly you're looking at a book, and why didn't you get this professionally printed in full color and blah blah blah. I want to keep it like a zine. So I wanted to also pay Alex and B and Jeff, so the Kickstarter is funding the money that's going to them. And I got this idea to do a video actual play because I thought it would be a way to hit sort of 3 different facets of how people engage with games. Like, you can actually just play the game. All the rules are going to be in there. You can listen to the podcast if you want to see the full development process of the game, and we do after session breakdowns like roses and thorns. How do we feel about this mechanic? We try new mechanics in the middle of play. And then the actual play is going to be produced post Kickstarter, and I'm going to be narrating that along with Danny, who is Brutal Dan with 2 O's on Twitter. Lovely beefcake of a himbo, self-described. With DJ or Big Bees, who is another streamer, and then B Zelda is going to be on the stream as well.
Cool.
Because I wanted to elevate streamers and people who do actual plays who are people of color, because I have the resources and ability to do so. And it turns out that people who do actual play streams get paid horribly. And when it came down to it, the amount of money that it would take to pay them well for what they're doing was something I could build into the Kickstarter. So I just decided to do it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
One of the things I really appreciated, so as I was like kind of finding out about the project myself, so it's really interesting, like, you're talking about the way people like experience these things, find out about them, get engaged with them or not, choose like whether it's going to be a project they follow or not. My own version of that is because like we do know similar people in the scene, right, in the industry, and so I forget whether I first saw Iron Edda because of just seeing a post from you, or whether I saw it through someone like Jeff, but I might have seen, somehow I got, it came on my radar screen, right? And it hadn't been before, interestingly. It hadn't been before in any of its previous iterations, right? So it's like the first time I've heard about it. And then so I'm like, okay, this seems like it's something cool that I would be interested in. I'm intrigued by this. What really helped me a lot, actually, was a long thread that you did explaining the history of Iron Edda. Cool. And by the way, some people in the chat are saying they're following the Kickstarter. Yeah. That's why I posted it. It's awesome. Very awesome. Everyone should go and hit follow on it. What the thread you did where you explained the history of Iron Edda was very helpful for me. It like walked me through as somebody new to it as an idea. Like it, and in one thread it sort of taught me, okay, this is the history of this. So do you mind telling people like now a little bit of the history of like how we got to Reforged and like where the I don't want to say, I don't know what language you use for its continuity, but like, it's,
Call it Mo, Tabletop Bellhop in the chat earlier called it a franchise. Just, I guess, go with that. I don't really have a better word for it.
Yeah, right.
That feels kind of pretentious to call it that, but at the same time, it's got 4 full games and an alternate setting. That seems franchise-like to me.
It seems pretty natural to call it a franchise, I think, at this point.
So back in 2013, this was just after the Fate Core Kickstarter had gone off. Machine Age Productions did a Kickstarter for a Fate mecha game called Apotheosis Drive X. And they were looking for stretch goal writers. And I was new to game writing at the time. I had written and published School Days and One Shot, my first 2 games. And Tabletop Bellhop just had the Iron Edda Legacy.
I love that.
I dig that a lot.
I love that.
So they were looking for stretch goal writers. And so I pitched them a fantasy mecha. And that's basically all that I said was fantasy mecha. And they didn't have anything else like that in their stretch goal stable. So they said, sure. And then I had to figure out what that actually meant. I was playing. I was playing a lot of Skyrim at the time.
Okay.
I still do, honestly.
Yeah.
And I love the Dwarven Ruins in that game and all the abandoned technology. And I started idly wondering what would happen if the big Dwarven Centurions made it from the depths up to the surface, right? And like, what would fight them? And dragons are boring. Everyone can do you're not doing dragons as a mech. Well, what else is in the setting? Well, giants are in the setting, right? Giants could fight those things. Well, what if they were all a lot bigger? And what if the giants were dead and humans were using their bones as mechs? And that was like the leap. So unfortunately, that stretch goal never got finalized. But what I wrote for them was published under Creative Commons. So I took the idea and I expanded it out into War of Metal and Bone. That's the first Kickstarter for Iron Edda. No, sorry. It's actually the second because I wrote a novel too because I have no sense of scope. And as part of that Kickstarter, I had, my eyes are way bigger than my stomach. I had stretch goals planned up to $100,000.
Yeah.
Every $5,000 was a new game or a new supplement.
Wow.
Yeah. It got to just shy of $20,000, which ain't bad, but it only funded one stretch goal. And that stretch goal was World of Metal and Bone, written by Paul Stefko. So basically using Dungeon World / Apocalypse World to tell the same kind of story, but with a different engine. And the idea behind all of the different system stretch goals of that first Kickstarter were that there are 3 things about Iron Edda that should be true for something to be Iron Edda. And they are that Ragnarok is happening, that humanity is bonding themselves to the bones of dead giants to fight, and that everyone belongs to one of 9 warrior clans. Like those are the 3 pillars of Iron Edda. And I was really intrigued by the idea at the time of seeing what other people would do with those 3 sort of ingredients, right? We see that kind of thing all the time now in like game jams. Yeah. Right. Someone will say, oh, here's the 3 things you need to do. Yeah. But what if you took this concept and you did that across a bunch of, and I had like people pitching me superhero ideas. I had Pacific Rim style stuff. Like there was a lot of stuff lined up. And I was a new game designer and way over eager, and none of that ever really panned out. You know, I don't think there's been another Iron Edda thing created by someone who's not me, aside from the one that Paul did that I paid him to do. However, I wasn't good at marketing. I wasn't good at supporting distribution, bad at it, right? All the things that it takes to run a business. I was 2 years into being a game designer, and I thought I could pull this off, right? I flubbed a lot of things along the way. And so round about 2018, I was thinking about Iron Edda and just had like this burning sort of desire to see it do more and do better. So I pitched it to a publisher called Encoded Designs. And we together kickstarted and published Iron Edda Accelerated. And that's based on the Fate Accelerated model that's found in Dresden Files Accelerated. So everything is archetype based, almost like character classes, where things were much more free form in the original. And the tone of it focused much more on like the price of power and what it takes to be part of a community. Okay. Right? So the Bone Bonded in Accelerated when they summon the bones, they have a chance for the giant to go on a rampage and like use their human body for whatever they want.
Wow.
For their what's it called? Their greatest desire, the thing that they can't have anymore because they're not alive.
Right.
So they just get to run your body around for a while. Exactly. The example that Tabletop Bellhop has played this game for me before. Whenever I pitched it at a convention, I would say, maybe they just want to eat a whole bunch of fried chicken. And then you wake up after a 2-day chicken bender, right? And your tiny human body has eaten a giant-sized amount of chicken.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So that idea of community planted the seed for what's happening in Iron Edda Reforged.
Okay.
So I had the idea that I wanted to do a cyberpunk game. And I tossed around a few different things, and I was like, well, why don't I make it Iron Edda? But why don't I do what I was asking other people to do and just stick with the pillars and change everything else up? So in the original games, Ragnarok happens in the form of 50-foot tall metal dwarven destroyers rising out of the ground. Like it's a Ragnarok no one expected. And of course, it's all Loki's fault, Norse myth based.
Right, sure.
You know? But in Iron Edda Reforged, you're living in a cyberpunk dystopia. The 9 realms, every realm is like the size of the eastern seaboard from Toronto down to like North Carolina. Right?
Okay.
It's a massive sprawling area, but it's all referred to as the city, and the gods run it like a cyberpunk dystopia, right? Their corporations feed everything that they want people to have. Most people are drones that just go about their days just working for the gods and doing whatever, because the gods have replaced worship with labor, right? That's the devotion they get.
Uh-huh.
But Ragnarok in Norse myth is inevitable, right? No matter what, Ragnarok happens and the gods fall. And in the end, there are 2 humans and 1 god left, and that's it. So what if the Ragnarok, the fall of the gods, as the trailer said, the neon Fimbulwinter, the eternal winter, was humans rising up, their communities rising up and taking down the god-run corporations, right? It is very resonant to the kinds of things that are sentiments that abound today under capitalism. And I thought that it would be a really good play on the entire thing. So that's the basic pitch is what I boiled down to in that trailer, right? Is that the gods are lording over everything. Giants have been completely subjugated to the point that their bones and neurons and synapses are being used to power the gods' computer networks. And Ragnarok is coming, and it's you. It's us. Because we're rising up. And mechanically, where we got to with the playtest, we got to a point where in this game, you start off and you make a set of characters, or you make a neighborhood, right? Because that's it's not one of the pillars of Iron Edda, but it's one of my favorite parts, is where you answer random questions to make your starting sort of habitation.
Super cool.
So you make a neighborhood, you make your characters, you start playing out that narrative. And as you make other NPCs, they're all just characters. And they're made the exact same way. So everyone provides details, right? So when you say, okay, well, you're meeting Svenga Halfred's daughter, right? She runs the tavern down the street. All the players provide a detail about her. Well, she's good with an axe. She always has a drink handy, whatever it is. Then, if you have a scene where you think that Svenga Halfred's daughter would be a better character to be the principal in that scene, you just switch characters.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so you're playing characters that you make.
Right.
If you want to go somewhere completely different, and we do this in the playtest, you get to hear it in I think episodes 3 and 4, once that drops. We had a character we'd made that they'd given details to, who was like this informant, and they wanted to see what a meeting with their circle was like. So I said, okay, there are 5 other people here. We made 5 characters real quick. Everyone picked the characters they wanted to embody, and we just ran the scene.
That's so cool.
We
love that idea.
That you need to have an end goal for the scene that you decide on. That way you have a narrative arc to sort of shoot for. But you can you're going to tell the story of the fall of the gods from whomever's perspective you want to tell it from. And it's not like the GM's just handing you an NPC and say, okay, you're playing guard number 2 tonight, right? It's the players going, no, I really want to see what the story looks like from this person's angle. And to that end, because the players have so much input into making of characters and how that goes, it's so close to being GM-less, like so close.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's. I mean, so what function does a GM, I guess, end up playing in? Well, I guess I have a question even before we get to that part, which is what for Reforged, what is the core, like what is the core mechanics, like what is it still based on Fate? Is it
no,
totally
it's not
different?
based on it is an amalgamation of things that I like from other systems.
Gotcha.
Right, so the details you give to your characters are a lot like aspects in Fate, except that in this game they have ratings. So there's excellent, good, and fair, and that is 10, 7, and 5 dice that you get for each of those. When you take a risky action, you choose which of your details applies to that action, and you grab those dice. It's all D6s, and it is Shadowrun style die pool rolls. So
Gotcha.
difficulties range from 1 to 5, and you're looking for 5s and 6s to be hits. If you do not like the results of your roll, you can spend a control point and create a detail in the world, on a person, whatever, that you use to justify your reroll, and you reroll your misses, and then those explode, right? Just like in classic Shadowrun rules. And then if you want to get a control point back, rather than the sort of give and take of compels like in Fate, you literally just choose to fail a risky action. So you can say, okay, I'm up against this guy. I'm just going to let him hit me. I'm just going to see what happens.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to take the L, and you get a control point for that. And I keep saying risky action because very specifically, you only roll the dice if it's risky. If it's something that you would just do as a matter of course, you just do it. You just narrate your action. Because I only want the dice to come into play when that uncertainty is interesting to people.
Yeah. Yeah, so that concept is basically, right, like, I'm familiar with that idea from playing Masks, running Masks. The idea that, like, just using your powers isn't interesting. You don't need to roll dice for that. You only need to roll dice when there's uncertainty, when you don't know what's going to happen, and then you roll your dice. And I think that's a really great principle.
Yeah, and then the last little thing, sort of how stress and all that is handled, is if you fail or you take success at a cost, the narrator, and this is one of the things, a group could decide this together, or the narrator can sort of be the arbiter, you get glitch dice. And glitch dice are a different colored set of dice that on your next action, you have to roll them. And if they come up with hits, they complicate your life, right?
Okay.
It could be a narrative complication. It could be that your abilities that you have don't function for a period of time. If it's narratively appropriate, the character you're playing could die. And it's okay if they do, because you can make it an appropriately dramatic story moment, because you can just switch to a new character, because that's what the game does.
Yeah.
And then the last mechanical bit is every character, based on their warrior clan, has 3 abilities. 1 at-need ability, 1 per scene ability, and 1 per session ability. And these are things like set some dice to successes before you roll, or help an ally do blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
And part of what is going to be different in the seasons, other than being different realms and different gods to take down, the warrior clans will get new sets of abilities every season that it gets released. So right now you have all 9 warrior clans plus the bone bonded, and there's 1 set of powers for every clan. When season 2 releases, there's going to be a new set. And if you have season 1 and 2, you could pick whichever one you wanted for your wolf clan member, or your snake clan member, or your ox, or whatever. So that's the whole system, and I've talked a lot. What questions?
No. That's why this is great. I really wanted to give you the chance to, like, one, explain to people, like, so people can, hear some details about how it plays, but also for me, like, this is like I'm learning about how this is what I want to learn out of this. So this is good for me. One of my thoughts just like rolling around in my head listening to this is like, it sounds like a lot for 65 pages. So I'm just curious from a like design and publishing standpoint, from like, your perspective, like, is that, maybe you're already done, like that's the thing, you're probably already done. It's going up in 8 days, so like
the text isn't done, but right now it's sitting at 38 pages.
Okay.
And one of the things that I'm doing with this project that I did not do with You Are the Dungeon, because You Are the Dungeon was a fever dream of a game that I wrote in like a day and a half.
Wow.
And it was pretty much, it was like one of those Athena from Zeus's forehead moments, right? Reforged needs more work and needs more to be done with it. So I have an editor coming onto this project. Dominique Dickey is a fantastic editor. They've done their own design work with Trial, and I can't remember the name of the other game that they co-designed and kickstarted, but Dominique is fantastic. They work with Possum Creek Games a lot. And so when we had our first meeting, I said, okay, this is going to be a zine, right? All of the text needs to be razor sharp. Right? It needs to convey everything that needs to be conveyed about the setting, the characters, the game, and it needs to convey it quickly and concisely, such that when you read it, you both understand how to play and you are gripped by it. So what that means in practice is there may not be a lot of example text, right? Example text takes up a lot of space.
Right. Absolutely.
But because we have the internet, right, I can say, if you want to see an example of play, go to ironedda.com, which currently there's nothing up there. I own the domain, but I haven't actually set the site up yet. Or I can point people to the podcast.
Right.
And I can say, listen to the podcast, or I can point people to the video AP and I can say, watch them play this. This is how this works. Right. So that's one of the reasons that I wanted to do those pieces, because this rules text on purpose is not going to be as fleshed out as other things you might see. If you have read Lumen by Spencer Campbell, it is a framework to do games in the style of like a Borderlands 2, Borderlands 3 looter shooter kind of game. It is tight. It's written concisely. It is maybe 16 pages long. And it's a whole ass game system, and it rules. I actually have an Iron Edda project in the works called Valkyries, which is a space sci-fi far future kind of a little retro 80s pastiche.
Okay.
That's going to use Lumen.
Okay.
Because it just works for that.
Yeah.
So I'm being very like the section about spotlight characters, right? So that's what I call the character you're playing.
Okay.
The section for spotlight characters, where I explain when you create a character and how to make new characters and how to switch, it is a page and a half of 8.5 by 5.5 text at 11 point in Google Drive, right? Like, I think it says everything it needs to say, but my editor is going to come in and tell me if something's unclear.
Right.
And together we're going to sharpen it down to like a laser precision.
And I was just thinking that I don't know like data on this at all, but just like my instinct is that like so often nowadays people approach a game having experienced it in some way already. So like whether that's they have seen, they've listened to an AP, or they've seen someone play it on Twitch, or they've seen it played at a con, or something. They've experienced it in some way. So the idea of the like, I need an example. Honestly, I personally skip them almost every time. I just don't necessarily. Maybe if I need a clarification, I'll go back and utilize them for the clarification. Like, oh, maybe I don't quite understand exactly how that works. But like, certainly my first read through with a new book, I don't read them.
Yeah, and they're hard to write because you have to make them sound natural, and that's really challenging. And so you made a good point when you said that people often engage with the text or with a game having experienced it some other way before. I'll go one farther. Nowadays, that is the only way they engage with the game.
Wow.
I have a folder full of PDFs that I have not been able to crack open once. Projects I've backed, things that I have thought were really cool, designers, creators I wanted to support. And and Tabletop Bellhop in the chat saying it too. We have game fans now, like sports fans. And sure, you could just be a fan of the creator. And that's why I like this. Iron Edge Reforged doesn't fall into this model, but the idea that reading the game is play is a really compelling one to me. That's interesting. Right? And there are texts that can be written that way, just like character creation is play. That was a really controversial statement 6-7 years ago. Right. Play has changed in definition. If you think about like a lyric game, right, which is an experiential poem where the act of reading it or doing the one thing it says to do is the act of play. Like that's a whole thing. It's a whole genre of games now that didn't really exist as a known quantity, say 3 years ago. Right. So there's a lot of room for what games can be and how people can interact with them. And if I run this Kickstarter and it's successful and all I get is some people who are really fans of Jeff and Alex and B, or of B and B's and Danny watching the video or listening to the podcast, great, fantastic. I've done it. Yeah. There's a percentage of people who are going to use the PDF that they get, and that's also great. And I want to make sure the text is clean and precise for them. But I want to make something where people can get with it on multiple levels. Yeah. And not just because it gives me a chance to exercise different creative muscles. Because if all I did was write things all the time, I wouldn't be able to handle this. Right. There's a reason that I've become a multidisciplinary person in the industry. It's because I wanted to. Right. I didn't necessarily feel pressure to. I did at times. Yeah, sure. But like, I decided that I wanted to learn how to be the total package, if you will, right? How to be able to write and design and revise and lay out and publish a thing all on my own. And now I wouldn't be able to be doing any of what I'm doing if I didn't have that. So I'm really glad that I've come to where I've gotten to with my design career. So this is kind of it's kind of blowing my mind a little bit because I hadn't thought about it this way, and like it was kind of like on the edge of my mind engaging with the concept of what you're doing with this Kickstarter, but the way you just explained it to me blew my mind in like a way that like I think it's awesome, and I'm not and I won't be surprised. I would not be surprised if this is now a thing going forward, that we see more of what you're doing, which is the idea that like you're launching this Kickstarter, right? People could back it. People could back it because they want the entertainment aspect of the game. So they want to consume you all playing the actual play and listening to the podcast, and never intend to play themselves. Like And then it's a new game for that. So like obviously the idea of like kickstarting an actual play, okay, yes, registers in my head, got it, yes, understand it. Backing a game to exist mostly for my entertainment purpose, not playing, but like listening to play. I had not, that's to me kind of blowing my mind a little bit because I hadn't made that connection, that like mental connection. And that is super fascinating, and also 100% where the industry seems to be going, like just naturally, right? Yeah. And if you think about how people could engage with the text if they do, say they back it because they want to see Danny on the AP. Yeah. Right, because Danny's got his own fans, and hopefully they decide that that's something they want to support. Right. Well, cool. They're going to get the PDF anyway. Right. They may decide that they're going to spring for the physical version, right? So they get this thing shipped to them, and they open it up. And if I did my job right, or did my job correctly writing it, then they're going to read it and be like, oh man, this is really interesting. This has different stuff than I saw them doing on the video. And in terms of what you can do, like, I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I played Dungeons and Dragons by like owning the red box and never actually playing the game with anybody else, but I made a lot of characters. Right. And so with this game, you could literally sit down and roll neighborhood questions and flesh out your version of puppet strings or the bubble, and you could have all these story hooks, and you could make characters, and you could just start telling this story by yourself. You could write fiction about it. You could, and these are not big leaps because the characters are so easy to make, right? Because it's so straightforward to do all that. And I see Tabletop Bellhop used a phrase in the chat that I avoided using because it's lonely fun. The idea of doing character work in between sessions years ago got typified as lonely fun, right? It's the stuff that you're doing that no one else may ever see.
Right.
The word lonely is what bothers me, because I didn't do it because I was lonely. I did it because I thought it was cool.
Yeah.
Right. And so no, I'm not calling Mo out or anything. I'm just saying that, like, that kind of exercise, that kind of engagement with the text is, I think, a very valid expression of what can be done with a game text. And I'm not anywhere in the text going to say, by the way, you could just sit around and do this by yourself, because just like with You Are the Dungeon and how spare it is in terms of what it asks you to do explicitly, that lack of clear instruction has led people to do a bunch of wild things with it, right? Like I saw someone do in an actual play where they set it on a derelict space Hulk, right? Did the game say you could do that? No. Did the people playing it think that would be a really cool idea and decide to do it? Yes. And that's the stuff that I'm interested in, right? So if I explicitly say in the text, oh, you can go and do this, well, then it just becomes another part of the game. It's not an emergent aspect of gameplay. It doesn't grip you the same way. If someone just decides to do it, oh, that's the juice. That's what I want to see people doing.
It is. That is the juice. I love that. And then, because I'm thinking, like, what you described as being like the child making a bunch of D&D characters, and like that's how you play D&D, like, or the adult doing that. Because I was thinking as you're saying that, like, I have a friend, I can think of other, friends of mine who, for like periods of their life as tabletop enthusiasts, like that was how they played, because it was the only way they played for a period of time. So, like, but my mind was going somewhere with that thought train. Oh, that, like, nowhere ever did, like, a Dungeons and Dragons 3.5 player's handbook say, like, hey, you can just sit around and make characters and, like, or build dungeons that you never intend anyone to run through, because it didn't need to. It's just like, but it is like, when you, like, that's kind of what I hope as a parent. I often think that my hope is, like, my kids, and I don't try to, I don't tell them they should do this, but I often think, like, man, I hope I see my kids cracking open an RPG book over there and, like, just, like, exploring it and just, like, creating stuff, and just, like, that is play, right? Like, that's 100% play. And it's natural for us to think about it as play when we think about, like, kids doing it. For some reason, when it comes to us as adults doing it, we, for some reason, I think, you at least used to be like, put up a barrier, like, oh, that's not exactly playing. Like, 100% is. That's 100% playing.
Yeah, and I think that we're seeing the unshaking of a lot of traditional ideas of what games are supposed to be. As different barriers in the industry come down, and we see more people who are making games that aren't straight white dudes, and we see more people at conventions who aren't straight white dudes, we're seeing all kinds of different examinations of what it means to play a game and what a game even is. Yeah. Right. And I think that as that happens, there's this idea, like, I grew up thinking I was a straight white dude, right? I sort of lived within those bounds of society, and I grew up thinking that there were things that I just shouldn't do because no one explicitly told me that I could, right? I was a scared kid in a lot of ways. I was a rule follower from a real young age. And so, if someone told me that's not how you play D&D, I would have put the books down and never done it again. Right. I just, but I didn't think that I was playing, I was just making characters. Right. But if I take my current framework and I impose it upon my past self, I go, no, you were totally playing D&D. You just didn't know it. Yeah. And I like that opening up of things. I really like people. It brings to mind to me the idea of having a guilty pleasure, which I think is a ludicrous phrase, because I don't feel guilty about any of the shit that I like, even if it sucks, even if it like objectively is not great. Like, I still enjoy it for very specific reasons, and those reasons are my own, and they're valid, and it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks, right? I feel no guilt about that. So why should I feel weird or bad that I'm playing a game perhaps differently than the designer intended?
Yeah.
Right. And I, as a designer, would rather open it up and just say explicitly, look, whatever you do with this thing, that this triumvirate of things that I'm making, great, fantastic. You know, if you only listen to the podcast in the bathtub once every 3 weeks, that's your iron at a time. Sure, whatever, go for it. It means something special to you. So, you know, it
certainly makes me feel better about the pile of backed Kickstarter books that I have never put into play, you know, because I've read them. So it certainly makes me feel better about that.
You have helped someone's dreams come true potentially.
Yeah.
Right. You know, I'm here on the back of 12 Kickstarters.
Yeah.
You know, You Are the Dungeon was a success because it was kind of the apotheosis of the first decade of my design career.
Wow.
Right. And it was the transition from having a day job to working full time in the games industry, doing editing for One Shot and doing project management for the One Shot network. That's like my base salary.
Sure. That's
what keeps, you know, the lights on at a bare minimum. But it gives me the space to do whatever it is I need to do during the day, which right now is make things, do projects for myself and other people, and take care of the baby.
Yeah, I was going to say, so like that's kind of where my mind was going, which is like the I'm just curious, that experience you just described, like having a baby, you know, like, because I again, as a parent, I know the pressure of needing to like feel like, okay, now other people, their literal life depends on me and my success, right? So but as someone in business by themselves, you know, like business by themselves in a sense, like as a game designer, trying to publish games, like what that experience is like, the pressure of like saying, okay, like I need to have successful game releases. I need to make it to the next Kickstarter. And we were kind of talking about this a few weeks ago on the show, when we had Hannah Schaefer and Evan Rolland on the show, and they're doing Turtle Bun now. And then they just did it's on One Shot. They just did a design doc episode where they're talking about that pressure to make it to the next Kickstarter. And so I'm just curious your experience of that aspect of it.
So I have a decent amount of what I don't think is unearned confidence in my own abilities, right? If this had all happened 3 or 4 years ago, I would have been a hot mess. There is no way that I would have been able to be in a stable position, work-wise, personally, emotionally, in terms of my relationship with my partner, or any of it, if we had had a kid 4 years ago, right? But life has conspired to hand us a really, really great deck of cards. So back when we found out that she was pregnant, because it was not expected, we did not plan. You know, I found out when I got back from a cross Ohio bike ride that I was doing to commemorate my 40th birthday.
Okay.
I made it from Cleveland to Columbus in 3 days.
Awesome.
I meant to get all the way down to Cincinnati in 2 additional, or no, I did that in 2 days. I meant to get down to Cincinnati in more time.
Gotcha.
No, 3 days. Yes. Anyway, didn't make it. Bad weather, flat tires. I'm home. She's not feeling well. She takes a pregnancy test, and holy shit. So, as part of our entire discussion process that day, we actually did a tarot reading, you know, just like, what are the vibes around this? And it was 2 paths laid out clearly. Like, and you read into whatever you want to in tarot cards, but one was with the baby, we have connectedness and togetherness and family and community. And the other one is isolation and sadness and despair. And it's like, well, this, as one little data point, this makes sense. So we start getting everything lined up, and her job is going really well. We find out the leave policy. We buy the house that we're renting, and we buy it from people who the landlord sold it to us for less than market value, and with extra money for us to effect repairs on it.
Wow.
In this housing market, it's ridiculous, right? This is not a thing that happens to anyone, and yet it happened to us.
Wow.
And then James reaches out from One Shot. He and I had talked a year prior about what I could do for the network long term, potentially. And the previous August, he had started sending me editing work for just the podcast. And I've been editing the One Shot podcast for a little over a year now. It was a year in August. So I was doing that work, and then with the pandemic, their recording studio could not be maintained, and that money was used to bring me on to do project management. Because, you know, you can see what One Shot makes on the Patreon, right? It's a certain amount of money a month, and it only can go so many places. Right. And they chose to do that. So I'm helping keep the gears going there. And so it was, while that's happening, there's a set amount of money I'll be getting a month. It's not too dissimilar from what I'm making at the retail job that I'm working. So I found out it was for sure happening on May 1st. And that's when I put in my notice. It's like May 1st is my last day at this job.
Wow.
And so we moved into the house at the end of April. I quit my job on May 1st. I ran the Kickstarter for You Are the Dungeon from mid-May until mid-June, and the baby came on June 24th.
You ever do one of those things, you ever see those checklists where they're like, how many things on this list can you check off? And that'll tell you like your, they're not an anxiety checklist. What is it? It's like, stress. I guess it's stressors, right? One of those stressors. You just checked off like, like a whole row of them on,
right.
One of those.
But the difference is that every single one of those things was the realization of a dream.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Our relationship was in a stable enough place that we thought we could have a family together.
Yeah.
Our finances were in a stable enough place that I could move to full-time design with an eye toward caring for the baby all day during the week.
Right.
And quit my job.
Yeah.
And then the You Are the Dungeon Kickstarter was like, it sealed it, right? Because the goal on that Kickstarter was $3,000 and it raised $39,000.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And it is. And chunks of that went to the production of the deck and so on and so forth. Right. But, you know, it put money in our pockets. And I am not shy about saying that if I am designing a Kickstarter for myself, or I'm consulting on somebody else's Kickstarter, I'm setting it up so the creator gets paid.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you put a pin in no stretch goals, but paying people more. And it's exactly for that reason. Yeah. Because when I talked to Jess from Utopia, they were going to be the producer for the AP series, and that fell through. But still, their information was very useful to me. If you pay actual play performers $40 an hour, you are close to Screen Actors Guild rates for legit professional Hollywood actors to come on and appear. $40 an hour. You think about a 2-hour AP, or you know, Rivals of Waterdeep, run 2 hours a shot, $80.
Right.
That's all you get.
Right.
Player, GM, tech crew, all the same, $80.
Yeah. Wow.
So I mathed it out, and it's like I can produce a 6-episode, 2-hour length AP series for $1,500.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Are you actually kidding me? And Jess told me that in some cases, that's life-changing type money for some people,
right,
who do this on the side, right? That's the extra money they need to not have student loan debt. To like, and I get it. I've been there. I know what that extra money can feel like. Yeah. And so I wanted to set this up so that people are getting paid for their labor and for their time at a good rate. So I'm paying everyone $30 an hour for the podcast. That's for the performers. That's for the editor, the AP. That's what they're getting for their time. The editor is getting paid 10 cents a word to edit. People talk about 10 cents a word for writing. No, I'm paying that for editing because I think it's well worth it. And Juan Ochoa, my artist, lives in Colombia, and he is getting $500 for his art, where for him, $500 stretches a hell of a lot further than it does here in the States.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what the money for the Kickstarter is going toward, right? And there's a chunk to produce the zines, and there's a chunk to pay me. So that's our $8,000.
Mm-hmm.
Anything beyond that, I am setting up in $4,000 marks, right? So it starts at 8, goes to 12. Great. $2,000 goes to me and my family, because I'm not going to be shy about, look, we have a kid, we have a house.
Yeah.
This is my life.
Right.
$2,000 goes to us. The other $2,000 gets split amongst everybody else. It's like $250 a person. And when you think about what they were getting paid before, it's like doing another, 8 episodes?
Yeah.
Or 8
Right.
more hours of work for free.
Right.
So that's every $4,000 that's happening. It's like, boom, done. Split. Everyone gets paid more.
Mm.
And I think that kind of thing is really valuable to do. And it helps me make this sustainable. It helps me make this something that people want to do with me.
Yeah.
Right? Because I have no illusions that the same people are going to be available for season 2 of the podcast or the AP.
Yeah.
I have no illusions. Actually, and season 2 is not even going to cost as much.
Right.
Because I won't have to rewrite
Right.
the parts of the system that are mechanical.
Right.
I'll have to rewrite the setting, and I'll have to rewrite the gods, and I'll have to rewrite the neighborhood questions and new stuff for all of the warrior clans.
Sure.
So a third of the book is just done, locked, finished. So I don't have to pay the editor to touch that.
Right.
I don't have to pay myself to touch that. So I think, and this is still a think, it hasn't even happened yet. The Kickstarter launches in a week and a little over a week. But if this works out, what I can do is every 6 months, I can do a season of Ironetta, right? And Tabletop Bellhop asked in the chat how many seasons I have planned.
Yeah.
Well, there are 9 realms. But functionally, 2 of those are sort of diasporaed throughout the rest of the realms.
Okay.
Right. So in fiction, right? So there are 7 seasons planned effectively for the remaining realms, right?
Right.
So I can do one of those every 6 months, and then on the opposite quarters, I can do a project like You Were the Dungeon, right? I can do a small zine project with a small reasonable goal.
Yeah.
Whose sole purpose is to generate revenue for me and my family.
Right.
And like I'm okay with that. That's part of what this model is. And then the rest of this, all of this, every time I do a Kickstarter update, I mention my Patreon, which is a pay what you can model, and I get people funneled over there. Because every bit I get, every dollar I get, even though yes, Patreon takes a cut and $2 is a better mark and blah 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 blah, that is still a rising base of income.
Right.
And over time, that plus one shot means that we are more stable and we're doing better.
Yeah.
So that's my business model. Until that proves to be unsustainable, that's what I'm going to be shooting for.
I really appreciate your willingness to talk about the business model, like transparency, to use that word, for like the money and the Kickstarter and like all that. But it's interesting because like you would think that in a Kickstarter world, right, and in a Patreon world too, where you're asking people to support your projects, you're saying to people like, hey, please, this is not you're not buying something, right? The Kickstarter goes to great lengths to tell people that, right? You're not buying something. Yeah. It's a different kind of relationship. So you would think the transparency would be maybe a little bit more baked in, but oftentimes it's not. But so anyway, I appreciate your willingness to sort of talk about the business model, and plus, like, as somebody who is, we talk about this stuff all the time in our network, like we talk about like, okay, how do we build our business model? Like, what are we going to do? And it's so much, figuring it out with not a ton of like examples out there to look at and say like, okay, well, here's one way of doing it. Here's another way of doing it. Because like, I don't know if it. Yeah, so I don't know if that's just because I'm not plugged in. Yeah. So Josh said in the chat, that's my partner, Apon, said we have no experience. And that's exactly what I'm getting at. Like, not knowing, we talk about this all the time. How do we build a business model? And like, what are examples out there of it? And I don't see people talking about as the way you just did, really laying it out. I don't see that very often. People talking about their model. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine. Part of the reason that I do that is because I've been open about how I do stuff since I started doing stuff. When I got started writing game stuff at all, it was around about 2011, and it was I was working on a campaign setting for a few different systems, and I had a website where I put up public blog posts, and it was by and large through insecurity, right? I didn't just want to write for myself. I wanted people to see it because I was waiting for someone to tell me that I sucked enough to stop, right? Is what that was the driving sort of grimy nihilistic factor that got me going. The thing is, no one told me to stop. And so I just kept going, and I saw people being transparent, and it made sense to me. It made sense to be public about it. And honestly, in the beginning, it was how I grew my audience. Yeah. It was just like, literally, this is who I am. This is what I'm doing. Yeah. And now it serves multiple purposes. One, I've been doing this for almost 10 years. It will literally be like January 22 will be 10 years since I wrote my first game. And that makes me an industry veteran, right? That makes me, someone who's been around. That makes me established. Definitely. And if you look at like my itch page, I've got 22 games up there, I think, and most of those have been written in the last 3 years. Yeah. It's a lot of games, Tracy. I will say, I was like looking through I didn't say this in my preamble, but I thought about it because I was like, I don't know if I've never seen so many itch games in the itch list. I was like, that's a lot of games. Yeah. It is. And they're all over the place because I write whatever I feel like writing at the time, so.
Which I want to share, by the way. So I'm doing that real quick. I want to share there it is. I want to share the link in the chat. So if folks want to check it out, they can check it out. I'm doing that. Sorry, go ahead.
But yeah, I want people to know what they're getting, and I want them to be excited about the stuff that I'm making because I'm worth being excited about. And that feels like maybe a kind of a gross statement to say, but like if you remember that everything I'm talking about, whether it's here or other places, every time I lay out a set of strategies for how to make a thing or how to market a thing. I've been talking about marketing a lot recently because I found out that I'm actually pretty good at it if I think about it in the right ways. All of these are strategies for existing and coping under capitalism. And if that system were gone, I wouldn't have to worry about any of this. I could just make stuff that I wanted to make, and I wouldn't have to tell people how to navigate this labyrinthine system of multiple, flows of income. And I wouldn't, and not that there's anything wrong with me being on this show tonight, but the primary motivating factor was not to come on and talk to Father Ben. The primary motivating factor was I want to tell people about what I'm making because I want them to back the Kickstarter. I'm having a great time, and I'm really glad that I'm here. But there's that sort of thread interwoven throughout all of this is that the things that I have to do and the strategies I've come up with for doing them exist because of the system that we all live under. And I have a lot of privilege afforded me that helps me do those things with a lot more ease than some people because I present as a male white dude, right? I'm obviously not. I say all over the place that I'm a queer person, but even that is only a slight marginalization compared to being, say, a black queer person. So I want people to be able to succeed. Yeah. If they're not doing the same kinds of things that I'm doing, I want them to be able to find their own route for doing it. And so I want to then on my projects work with people who my money will help, who are good at what they do, who have their own fan bases, who can build up their own thing, right? And we can all be shouting each other out. And literally have the rising tide lift all ships, right? I think we're well past the point of illusion when thinking that when Wizards of the Coast or Paizo or Magpie does really well, that it's going to mean something really good for everyone else. It's not. Like, we're past the point of people needing to have Dungeons and Dragons explained to them conceptually, right? We crossed that bridge about 5-6 years ago. And now we have to advocate for each other. We have to lift each other up. We have to make sure that we are mutually supporting one another, even in just small ways, by saying, hey, I'm here if you need someone to talk to, right? Like, I don't charge for game consultation anymore.
Oh, really?
If I see your social profile and you don't look like a douchebag, then I'll give you an hour of my time and we'll just talk.
Wow.
Because I think it's worthwhile. I'm not going to charge you $30 for that.
Yeah.
Right. That's my hourly rate.
Yeah.
It might be going up soon.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
right.
But I want all of this to be better for everyone, because not everyone is privileged or lucky enough to be in the position that I'm in. It is not easy to raise a child. You know that as well as I do. But I was talking about this with my therapist the other day. When you lay out the problems that I'm facing, these are all really good problems to have. Oh no, I have to figure out how to successfully market my Kickstarter that's going to make me and my friends money. Oh no, I have to figure out how to balance working at home as a full-time game designer with raising a beautiful, precious baby. Perish the thought.
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that days aren't hard and things aren't stressful, but goodness, these are enviable problems to have.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not fighting sickness. I'm not fighting the loss of a loved one. I'm not dealing with grief or tragedy or overwhelming hardship. I'm dealing with life, and I got dealt a pretty good hand recently. You know what I mean? So if through those efforts where, as I said bluntly, I'm supporting my family first and foremost.
Yeah.
But if I can also support and bring up others, then I'm going to try to do that.
Right. But yeah. Well, and to go back to something you said about that you said you phrased it in a way that, and you said that maybe it was not a great way of phrasing it, or maybe it was like too bold of a statement. The thing about you want people to, like, the idea of supporting you on Patreon and Kickstarter. I don't remember exactly the
I want people to support me because I'm worth supporting.
That's it. So on some level, right? Like that is the case, whether we say it explicitly or not. Anytime we do Patreon, anytime we're doing a Kickstarter, it's a part of it, right? Like maybe it's a little less with the Kickstarter, but certainly with like something like a Patreon, we are basically saying to people without using that language, like, I want you to back me because I'm worth backing, right? I mean, I feel like that's built into it, and I don't think that's a bad thing at all. And then I just sort of thinking about like what you're like. I think like at this point in the industry, right? Someone in your position or someone else who's a designer can, like, you're not going to be Wizards of the Coast, right? Or even Magpie. At this
don't want
point.
to.
Right, exactly. Well, that's the thing, and you don't want to. But like if you have a dedicated group of people who like what you do and are willing to support that, and you can build those connections with them, so it's a smaller group of people who you have built a relationship with, like I feel like that is maybe even a more sustainable model than trying to produce at some unrealistic level of sales, some unrealistic level of content creation.
It absolutely is, and I think as a largely solo independent creator, that's about the only viable route that I see, at least for me.
Yeah,
I'm not a good freelancer when it comes to writing.
Okay,
I'm far too self-invested to want to write my words for somebody else.
Yeah.
Right. I know too much about how to run a project and to generate interest in it and to get people to back it or support it or buy it, to want to give that labor to somebody else. And I'm uniquely suited to things like running Kickstarters, right?
Yeah.
I'm uniquely suited to, or not uniquely, lots of people can come on shows like this and talk, but obviously I like to talk about this stuff. I like to talk about myself. Right. I'm the beneficiary of my education. Like, I've got a BA and a master's in education. I was a teacher for a little while. Like, my dad taught public speaking, and I grew up in community theater. I know how to perform and talk and engage and blah 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 blah.
Right.
I know how to do all that stuff. So I'm built for this. This is like I've found the groove that I fit into,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really, really cool to be able to do that.
Yeah.
The path forward isn't going to be the same for everybody, right? Like there are people who absolutely don't want to get within 1,000 feet of Adobe InDesign, right? Or even Affinity Publisher. They don't want to do layout. They don't want to do anything. They don't want to do anything visual. They want to write the words. They want to give them to somebody else, and have them make them pretty, right?
Right.
That's great. For a long time, that's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then over the years, I've seen these designers do things, and I have had a desire to tinker with the stuff myself, and I've gotten passively, at least, I've gotten okay at layout, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten to the point where I can make things look the way I want them to look. Whether or not you dig my aesthetics or my taste level is another matter entirely. But you know, it's really challenging to do all of this stuff. And I think the primary thing, the thing I keep coming back to, and if like someone were going to ask me for like the one piece of advice for how to do this and so on and so forth, you have to just want to keep doing it, right? You have to find something about it, some aspect of it that keeps you coming back and doing it. And that's part of why I do so many different things, is because just doing one part of it, I would get burnt out on it.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why I write. That's why I edit games for other people. That's why I do audio work. That's why I edit audio work for other people. You know, that's why I do layout. That's why I do Twitter threads. You know, it keeps it interesting and engaging. And the trick for me is not getting lost in the haze of, oh, what 5 things do I have to do right now? You know, like I have a big working to-do list that I have to keep up on. And the last time I checked my to-do list, I have like 20 projects on there that are mine or other people's. Yeah. You know, so it's not that it's not a lot. It's just that I'm built for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the plate spinning is the tough thing. I resonate with that. The plate for me, for me, it's the spinning of lots of different plates. So it's just a matter of like learning to do that better, right? Like learning to spin different plates and keep them going. So figuring out like what works for me, what systems work for me, so that. Because what fuels me is definitely doing a variety of things, right? Like in addition to being a parish priest, like doing a podcast network, and well, it's not even an entertainment network, and game design, and you know, being involved in the tabletop industry. I want to do both those things at the same time. It involves a certain amount of plate spinning that I'm not always good at, but it's worth it. It's worth it.
And I think for me, one of the tricks is that it doesn't, on the good days, it doesn't feel like plate spinning, right? On the good days, like today was a good day, right? Today, everything went just the way that it should. The baby wasn't a hardship to deal with. It wasn't stressful to help her be a small, tiny person in the world. You know, today I could compartmentalize things, and I knew the one thing that I needed to work on was like to get the Kickstarter page ready. Like I could chunk everything up. And so while I'm focusing on that and taking care of the baby, the other plates are spinning, but they're not on those little spindly sticks. That you get anxious about everything falling. They've got their own little anti-grav platforms. And they're just hanging out. They're just hanging out there. They're doing their own thing, and when the time is right, I'm gonna be like the user interface and Minority Report, right? And I'm just gonna swipe something over, and that piece is gonna be what gets expanded in front of me. Yeah,
there you go. Sorry, my mind's going to a lot of different places here, but
that's okay. I tend to travel down a bunch of different paths.
No, that's great. I do have a question about style that something you said reminded me that I wanted to ask you this. The style of this is kind of really, really shifting gears way back into the game from kind of what we were just talking about. But I've been I wanted to ask you about, you describe Reforged as being vaporwave instead of metal. And I was curious as to like, where that came from, and like I'm curious about vaporwave as an aesthetic for TTRPG. Because I'll be completely honest, I had to Google it because I was like, I'm not sure if I know what vaporwave is until I saw it, and I was like, oh, of course I do. I totally 100% know what it is. Once I see it. but
So it harkens back to something that I didn't realize about the original Ironetta games, is that they were metal as hell.
Yeah, right.
They were high fantasy to a heavy metal soundtrack. And I was really bad in the earlier years about sort of knowing really what the heart of the game was.
Interesting.
Right. And I designed a lot of things instinctually. Like it's because the part of how I grew up and part of how I was as a performer, as someone who operated just as a person in the world, I was very good at sensing impressions of things, right? Like I could get the idea of something by seeing it aesthetically or listening to somebody talk, and then I could take it and I could just replicate it for a brief moment, right? It wasn't sustainable. It wasn't I couldn't like, Catch Me If You Can, pretend to be a pilot, right?
Yeah.
But I could mimic something for a short period of time. And so I was absorbing a lot of these things and just sort of spitting them back out without being able to put words exactly to what they were, even though it all hung together in a convincing fashion, right? So I didn't know that War of Metal and Bone, it's even in the name, was metal, right? Was just like epic, raw. Right. And so as the years have gone on, I've tried to get better about really focusing on that. And the way I think about it internally is focusing on the feeling of it. And like you, if you asked me to define vaporwave, no chance, couldn't do it. But I have a sense impression of what it means internalized. And in the things that I've put out visually and textually for Ironetta Reforged, like here, I'll get out of the way real quick.
Yeah, right.
Like it hits those notes.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you what about it does, but I know it feels right.
Interesting.
Right. So, and when I pair it with the music that I used in the trailer, it's by an artist named Scott Buckley. All his stuff is Creative Commons. It's free to use. Just give him credit. He has a vast catalog of good stuff.
Oh, cool.
Like that hit the right notes. It reminded me of the movie Drive.
Yeah.
Right? That has the song Night Call by Krasinski in it when he's just driving. And it's just like that beat hits and it's that little synthy thing. And then like almost the vocoder sounding voice, right? That's the heart. That's the feel that I want for this, right? It's being in an autopiloted flying car as it goes down between buildings. It's like, it's moments of Blade Runner, right? It's moments that we see in the Matrix, but imagine that the buildings are made of bones, right? Imagine that the wires running across are sinew. It's this amalgamation of stuff. And I knew that line, that original Ironetta was metal and Reforged is vaporwave, would resonate with people, because if you know what they are explicitly, you're like, oh yes, I get those two things. No worries at all. If you get, like me, sort of sensory internal impressions of those things, it still hits.
Yeah, right.
Because you go, oh, I see those words. I get, and then I see the image. Aha, I understand now, right? And that's the thing I learned with You Are the Dungeon, is about finding a good hook and a good tone for presentation, right? Every marketing tweet, every marketing thread for You Are the Dungeon that I wrote, I ended with the phrase, "You are the dungeon." Because one, it's the title of the game. Right. And two, it's evocative. It tells you exactly what's going on. Ironetta Reforged has a whole lot more layers to it. There's a lot more to explain to kind of get what it is. But when I say Ragnarok is coming and it's you, boom, you may not get it. You don't know what Ironetta is, but you get the idea. We're talking about Norse something. We're talking about the fall of the gods, and you're responsible. Those are all big, hooky, draw you in things. Right,
absolutely.
And when you layer the phrase Neon Fimbulwinter, right? You may not know what Fimbulwinter is. Right. It has a capital F, It's an important word,
Right.
right? You might be able to go look it up and you go, aha, it's the eternal winter. It's connected to Ragnarok. And neon, okay, cool. Now I have an aesthetic tone, right? So I worked really hard. It took me a lot longer actually to find sort of that path toward marketing Ironetta Reforged than it did for You Are the Dungeon. But that's how I'm trying to hone down everything that I do, even the small games that I write. I want to be able to write a quick hook and get you in. Like if I pitch you the game Neon Sundown, I say that you are a smooth talking, hip shooting rhinestone cowboy on the streets of Strip City. Boom.
There you go.
Game. Do you want to buy it? Go for it. You know what I mean? Like that. But that's, I try to find the pitch, because it's the old adage, right? If you've got an elevator pitch, you've got 10 seconds with someone.
Yeah.
If you've got a pitch that can hook someone in, then they'll listen to you for 30 seconds. If they listen to you for 30 seconds, then you can get a meeting, blah, 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 right? That's old terminology, and things don't really work that way anymore, but the principles are solid.
Yeah, I was going to say it's savvy, because like nowadays it's the same thing, but with everyone's attention, because we're just completely inundated constantly with sensory information and ideas and stuff online, and like, so like you only have a second, right, to hook somebody to a new thing. Like I see Kickstarters every day, so like, you know, you only have a second to like hook somebody into like, why should I pay attention to this thing?
Yeah, and I've got the 30 days leading up to launch, and in this case, the 18 days of funding to get people in. So I have to find what I can do. I have to layer in the things over time, so the people who are around a lot really get the full impression of it, and they become the people who are talking about it to other people. And I have to find a hook that I can have in everyone to get the new people into it. So yeah, it's a whole thing.
So speaking of that, that's a good transition segue into let's hook people into it. So tell folks, like, give us some data, like not data, but info, deets on obviously we've talked about the date, but just when the launch is, what people can do to get involved, to get to catch it, all that stuff.
Sure. So Ironetta Reforged is coming to Kickstarter on September 28th, and that is a week from this Tuesday. You are seeing me stall for time right now because I am pulling up the link for that, so I can drop it into the chat. Boom, there it is.
Awesome.
There's the link. You can follow it right there. That is the first most important thing that you can do if you're watching this, is to hit that link and to go follow it, so you will be notified the moment that it launches, which is at either 9 or 10 a.m. Eastern on that Tuesday morning. The next thing you can do is you can follow me on Twitter, same handle here, at The Other Tracy. And there is a tweet that is pinned to my profile that you can go and find, and you can retweet that. It starts with this same image that is right here behind my head, and the link to the Kickstarter that you just clicked and followed, because you're an awesome person, immediately follows that, plus a breakdown of what is going on with this project. So you get to hear about the actual play and who all is in it, and the video, or the podcast and who's in it, and the video actual play and who's in it. And then you can check out the rest of my profile and see how I comport myself and how I do things, and all the threads about Ironetta that Father Ben has talked about through all of this. Yeah. And you can see that I'm pretty generally a good person to follow, as long as you like a hefty dose of activism along with your games.
Sure.
And beyond that, you can look for the first episode of the podcast to drop the same day the Kickstarter launches. That is part of the One Shot Podcast Network. We've already recorded the audio. It's already edited. And so episode 1 of that drops the day the Kickstarter launches.
Oh, that's awesome. That was going to be my next question, is when can I listen to the awesome podcast I'm excited about? Yeah.
Yeah. So you can listen to that. The thing that will be interesting is that the system that you will get in the final, you will not find in the podcast until about the second episode.
Gotcha.
The second actual episode, because there's a long episode 0 where we set everything up, and then there's the first 2 episodes that are our first session of play, and at the end of that and into episode 3 is where we get to the system that you're seeing in the actual game. So you actually get to see the whole thing develop across those episodes, which is pretty cool and pretty unique, I think.
That is really cool. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's everything. If you want to find out more about me, I'm everywhere at The Other Tracy. Don't put an E in Tracy or you won't find me.
There you go.
But yeah,
Awesome.
that's me. That's it. That's Ironetta. That's the stuff.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
man. Every time I get to the end of an episode of Holy Happy Hour talking to somebody, I'm like, I want to talk to this person for a whole nother hour because like there's like so much more unpacking we could easily do. We easily could have talked about this so much more. But Tracy, thank you so much for coming on the show, making the time as part of your like busy schedule, getting ready for the Kickstarter. I like you said earlier that, you know, of course there's that you have the interest of, you have a Kickstarter, right? You didn't do it just because it's fun to come on the show. You did it because you have the Kickstarter. I rely on that in to at least some degree to get people to come on the show. But it always turns into really good conversations. But in particular, I was excited about having you on to talk about Iron Edda because I thought it sounded so badass, and I'm really glad we got to talk about it.
I'm really glad we did as well. This was a lot of fun, and if you want to develop a little rivalry between me and Jeff Stormer, then have me on again, and we'll see who gets to be the third Pete guest.
Awesome, love it. That makes me so happy. Awesome. Well, Tracy, if you'll hang around for just a minute, I'm going to say goodbye to our audience here and get them transitioned into our next network show. So stick around for me, Tracy, and I'm going to jump back to just me here real quick. And folks who are in the chat, I really appreciate you all hanging around. Here's the cocktail again, in case you want to make it right up on the screen. I appreciate everyone's chatting the whole time. That was awesome. Really fun to have you all. Thanks for the, saying you enjoyed it. I really appreciate it. So now I'm the one stalling as I'm pulling my script back up. Make sure I don't forget anything. So huge thanks again to Tracy Barnett for taking the time to come on the show. Don't forget, again, we got a week from tomorrow. Make sure you check out the Kickstarter when it goes live next week. Another thing you could do, which I would appreciate, is hitting follow right here on this page to follow my Twitch account. You can follow my show and some of the other streaming I do here as That Gamer Priest on Twitch. Also, it is Subtemper, which is a promo thing that Twitch does, which means that subscriptions are 20% off. So if you have an interest in subscribing this month or gifting a subscription to someone, you can do that for 20% off right there. You'll see the button. If you only caught part of tonight's show with Tracy and you want to hear the whole thing, you'll be able to watch it on demand for a brief time here on Twitch, but you can head over to allportsopen.com. You can watch every episode of Holy Happy Hour Batman afterward. I've had other really awesome guests. You heard about Jeff Stormer being on the show. Other people that got mentioned in this episode, like James D'Amato, have been on the show. If you go to allportsopen.com, you can watch every single episode. If you watch this on YouTube or you want to check us out on YouTube, All Ports Open Network on YouTube, you can watch all of our video content there on our YouTube channel. There are some great Twitch streams going on from our network. In just a minute, I'm going to be raiding us into Branching Paths with Kimber and Josh. They're playing Half-Life right now, like the original Half-Life. It's basically the concept of that show is that Kimber's a brand new gamer, brand new video game player. Josh has been around forever, and Josh is kind of like leading Kimber through these classic games, and they do a lot of game history and trivia and stuff like that along the way. It's real fun. So we're going to be raiding into that in just a moment, so stick around. I'm going to bounce us into that show. We have TTRPG actual plays on Tuesday and Wednesday. It's our own horror game written by Josh. It's called The Worst Days. You can go to @TheWorstDays here on Twitch at 8:30 p.m. We have horror nights, 2 nights in a row. On Thursdays, you can go to the @AllPortsOpen Twitch channel, where you can see me playing video games with other folks from our network. That's Thursdays at 9 p.m. Here on Twitch. Oh, and actually, just come right back here. Just come right back here to my Twitch channel, and you can watch me play here, actually. So one other thing, and I know a lot of housekeeping at the end, but one other thing I want to tell you about, because I'm excited about it. Our network's audio drama, Weeping Cedars, which is a slow horror audio drama that's been pretty successful. We're really excited because the final season of the main story that was set out to be told at the beginning of that series 2 seasons ago, the final season, season 3, begins tomorrow. And so huge congratulations to my partner Josh, my network partner Josh, for getting season 3 out to launch, and to the whole cast of that show and to everyone involved in it. It's really exciting. Weeping Cedars season 3 starts tomorrow. Check it out wherever podcasts are found. So huge thanks to Josh for working with me on the network and for all of the art here on my stream. Huge thanks to Doctor Octoroc for the use of his music on the show. Thanks to all of you for listening to me go on and on here at the end. I appreciate you letting me finish my housekeeping. I'm Ben, that gamer priest here on Twitch. We'll be back next week with Joshua A.C. Newman. Really good episode coming up next week. So I hope to see you then. For now, enjoy the holiest and happiest of hours, and we will see you again real soon.